over the weekend, Tennessee obviously beat UTEP 56-0. That wasn't really the story of the weekend for Tennessee. The playoff was. But in the game, Jermod McCoy had an interception. Rickey Gibson III forced a fumble and had a tackle for a loss. John, Jermod McCoy has looked like an All-American to me this year. I've compared him to the Dwayne Goodriches of the world and even the Alontae Taylors a few years ago. Rickey Gibson looks like such a good second cornerback, though. Is this the best cornerback tandem you've ever seen at Tennessee?
Wow, that covers a lot of ground. I'm trying to think back. I don't think of nobody's ever called Tennessee cornerback U.
They have not. They have not.
If I'm looking for positions of weakness through the years, I think cornerback is something I would that would come to mind. Probably when I think of Tennessee, I think of safeties before I do cornerbacks. Even going back to the net, when you start talking about Tennessee's most talented teams, those were in the 1990s, and I'm just trying to think about a cornerback tandem that I would deem best ever. I go back to on the championship team, Dwayne Goodrich made a big play in the national championship game. He played in the NFL. He was a really good player. Steve Johnson was a cornerback on that team too. Maybe a little underrated, but he wasn't at the level of Goodrich. He wasn't the pro prospect that Goodrich was. So I'm really at a loss to think of a really dynamic cornerback tandem.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to see another season of these guys before I say they're the best.
Okay, so let's talk about them individually, because let's just take Jermod McCoy for a minute. Where would you rank Jermod McCoy among cornerbacks you've seen at Tennessee? You brought up Dwayne Goodrich. I also know Jabari Greer and Alontae Taylor a few years ago. Is he in that category to you already?
Probably. Cam Sutton always comes to mind when I think about cornerbacks at UT. Perhaps not as heralded a recruit as a lot of guys, but who played really well, really did a nice job for Tennessee and has had an NFL career. I think Jermod McCoy is probably as good as anybody just based on this year. I couldn't say as much for Rickey Gibson. I don't put him in McCoy's category right now.
No,
here's
I don't
another
either,
thing. Okay. Well, here's something else, Caleb, I wonder about. When I look at Tennessee's cornerbacks, Tennessee's whole secondary, it's hard for me to separate one DB for another. I mean, I look at maybe the whole picture. Tennessee's secondary did not perform well against Georgia. Carson Beck, for all his problems this year, had a horrific slump, 12 interceptions in 6 games going into Tennessee, but played really well against Tennessee, showed the qualities that reminded people why he was considered a first-round draft pick. Then against a much lesser opponent the following week, last Saturday, against UMass, he threw for 4 touchdowns. Now, that made me kind of believe, okay, maybe he was in a slump. He snapped out of it. He owes Tennessee a thank you for that, I guess. But I'm thinking about how many really good passers has Tennessee faced this year. We can certainly safely, I think, dismiss 4 non-conference opponents.
Yes.
I guess my point is, if we look at this from a perspective of pure passer, who has Tennessee faced that throws the ball better than Carson Beck? Do you think Jalen Milroe does?
No, particularly if you force him in the pocket.
I know. That's what I mean. For a guy that's going to drop back, take a 3-step drop and throw the ball, Carson Beck is probably the most proficient passer we've seen against Tennessee. and yet he hadn't had a great year. Florida, Graham Mertz he's okay. He got hurt in the Tennessee game, didn't last the whole game. So when we talk about Tennessee's cornerback play or even its overall secondary, I haven't seen it against great quarterbacks. It played well against Jalen Milroe. He didn't have a good game against Tennessee, but he was horrible against Oklahoma. He has those kind of games. Maybe Jalen Milroe at his best would have posed more problems for Tennessee. And maybe I should credit Tennessee more for holding him down and keeping him contained very well. But so it's really hard for me to I guess I'm not as high on Tennessee's cornerback duo as you are. That's I guess that's the bottom line here.
Okay, so you don't think they've been tested. That's fair. What about, is it fair to say, though, I mean, compared to, I'll say this in their defense against Georgia, there's not much they could have done, and Jermod McCoy played poorly in that game, but I felt they were limited because of the lack of pressure the defensive front brought. So they were on the island for a while.
Yes, but oftentimes this season, they've benefited from a lot of pressure from the defensive front. That was the exception. So would they have fared as well with the lesser defensive front, lesser pressure? I don't know. And when you think about it, it's really kind of difficult this is something I guess NFL scouts can do better. When you start, because they're all connected. Linebackers can play really well when they're behind an awesome defensive front. They don't have to worry about those offensive linemen getting to them because the defensive front will provide a nice shield. They can just go to the ball carrier. Secondary benefits so much from defensive pressure from up front. So it's kind of hard to isolate. But I've seen McCoy do things that you want an elite cornerback to do. The other side of it, I'm trying to think about great receivers Tennessee's faced. NC State's Concepcion seems to have a lot of talent. I don't think he's had as good a year. I haven't really followed the Wolfpack, but I don't think he's had as good a year this year as he did last year as a freshman when he looked like he could be one of the elite receivers in college football. Maybe that's the guy Tennessee should look for in the transfer portal. But I'm just thinking, there just haven't been these elite receiving cores. I think Ole Miss has the best receiving core in the SEC. Tennessee didn't play it, of course, when everybody's healthy. When you've got Trey Harris as the number one guy, and then you've got some other good receivers around him, that's the toughest receiving core. I think LSU's receiving core is pretty good. Tennessee didn't play LSU either. Ryan Williams at Alabama, really good, great freshman. But I don't know if he's had as much his supporting cast. The rest of that receiving core is not up to Alabama standards. So I'm really avoiding this question, I guess. That's what it comes down to, because I just don't know about these guys. I do really like McCoy, but as far as Gibson, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. So what about this weekend though? Would you, if they shut down Diego Pavia this weekend, would you change your tune at all?
No.
Really?
I don't think Diego Pavia. I think he's beat up. I don't think he's throwing the ball as well now as he was in September. He still runs. He's still a feisty, fiery guy. He still's a good playmaker, but I don't know that he's a great passer right now. He certainly struggled against, I guess it was in the South Carolina game. They took him out against LSU. I don't really expect him to finish the game against Tennessee. Most quarterbacks don't, and he's going into the game already kind of bunged up. So I don't think that. No, that to me wouldn't be Vanderbilt's passing game. Certainly better than it used to be, better than last year, but I wouldn't use that as a measuring stick. Sorry, Caleb, I'm not helping you here. I'm really trying, but I just can't quite pull it off.
John, you're such a Debbie Downer. No,
You've had some Debbie Downer moments too, Caleb. I've been on here in some of your Debbie Downer phases.
Well, yeah, I've had a few. I try my best to be positive.